Howdy again everyone, and today I'm testing a very interesting circular fisheye lens designed for use on mirrorless APS-C cameras, the Meike 6.5mm f2. It's a fully manual lens that's available for Sony E-mount, Fuji X mount, Canon EOS M and Micro Four Thirds, and it only costs £130 or $150 US. That's potentially great value for money. I'd like to thank Meike for sending me a copy of this lens for testing, but as usual this is a totally independent review. And here is what a circular fisheye lens can do. The angle of view of this instrument is 190 degrees, it can actually see slightly behind you. So you have to be careful how you hold your camera so you don't get your fingers or your feet in the shot. The lens also has an unusually bright maximum aperture of f2, meaning it can let in a lot of light, which is useful for shooting indoors or at night time. I found it quite enjoyable to shoot with in the dark, actually. There's also a Micro Four Thirds mount version of this lens, but because Micro Four Thirds is a tighter crop, you won't actually get a fully circular image. And unfortunately, even if you are shooting on an APS-C camera, that fully circular image will elude you when shooting video too, because most cameras shoot in a 16:9 aspect ratio, the top and bottom get cut off. If you want to get fully circular fisheye video, your best bet is to shoot in 4K on a full-frame mirrorless camera, like the Sony A7R II I'm using here, and then crop in a little. And also, this lens will not fit or work on digital SLR cameras at all, only mirrorless cameras. Let's look at the lens itself. Isn't that front element pretty? And vulnerable to scratches unavoidably. Thankfully, the lens comes with a nice metal lens cap which slips on quite securely. Wide-angle lenses designed for mirrorless cameras tend to be nice and small, and this lens is no exception. It will fit in anyone's camera bag and not draw attention to you. It's pretty solid though, being made of metal and weighing about 300 grams. You can tell when it's fitted on your camera. As I mentioned, it's a fully manual lens, manual focus and manual aperture. With a lens of such a wide angle, manual focusing is really no problem, even for a beginner. Just use the distance scale on a focus ring or live view mode on your camera if you're not sure. The focus ring is rubberized and its action is nicely damped. It turns very smoothly and precisely, and it's a pleasure to use. The aperture ring also turns smoothly from f2 down to f22. On my copy of the lens, I found those markings to be inaccurate. By testing out shutter speeds in my pictures, I found that you had to turn the aperture ring a lot further than indicated to stop it down. Apart from that though, the lens's build quality is great. It's small, solid and simple. I love small lenses, and mirrorless camera systems clearly seem to offer that design possibility to lens manufacturers. Let's see about sharpness then, and because of the nature of this lens, I've abandoned my usual test chart this time. I'm testing it on a Sony A6300 camera with its demanding 24 megapixel APS-C sensor. Because the aperture ring is inaccurate, I stopped the lens's aperture down by one-stop increments, checking my progress by the camera's shutter speed. Probably not the most accurate way to do it, but I was out of ideas. At the maximum aperture of f2, we can see that the image is very sharp in the middle, with good contrast and neutral colours. That impressive sharpness continues across most of the image frame, although the edges are a little soft at f2. Stop down to f2.8 though, and there's already a major improvement, with good sharpness in the edges and fantastic resolution everywhere else. From f4 and beyond, it's really astonishing how much detail is being packed into those image edges. If you look down to the bottom left, it seems like every blade of grass is jumping out at you. Overall, the lens's sharpness and contrast is pretty fantastic. What's also impressive is its lack of chromatic aberration and quite minimal vignetting, even with the aperture wide open at f2. It delivers a seriously cleaner picture, even on a 24 megapixel sensor, and it's good to use a lens like this on a high resolution camera because the image takes up so much less of the frame than usual, so you'll naturally want to get as much detail out of the lens as you can. Now, I'm foregoing my usual distortion test because, well, circular fisheye. So let's see how sharp the lens is at close distances. It can focus as closely as about 19 centimeters. Not very close really, but good enough for some smaller subjects. The good news is that, even from f2, close-up image quality remains very sharp, as you can see here. With its bright maximum aperture and extreme field of view, this lens could be good for astrophotography, so let's see about its chroma levels. At f2, we continue to see great clarity in the middle of the image, and the corners look very good too, with maybe just a tiny touch of chroma smearing visible. Stop down to f2.8 if you want a perfectly clean image. When it comes to flaring, in normal use I was very pleased to note that I never noticed any flaring in my pictures, even with the sun in the frame. Impressive. When I did my usual test against bright lights, I found that you could indeed provoke some flaring by pointing the lens directly into a very bright light, if you wanted to. But in reality, unless the sun is right in the middle of your picture somewhere, it's not going to be a problem. And finally, bokeh. You'd think that bokeh would be a pretty redundant issue on a circular fisheye lens, and it mostly is, but with that wide maximum aperture of f2, at very close distances, you can get just a little background separation. That bokeh looks quite smooth to me. Overall, if you have a mirrorless APS-C camera, then the Meike 6.5mm f2 is a seriously enjoyable lens to use, and it backs up the fun by offering great image quality too. It's not easy to use a circular fisheye lens, and they have quite limited applications, but there's no doubt that, when used well, they can yield some quite striking and beautiful images. It may not be for everyone, but at $150, it's certainly great value for money, and so it comes highly recommended.